Hello, I'm Dazzling One, and this week I'm going to be talking about the Zodiac or astrology and what my beliefs and where I stand on it. I was asked about a month ago if I could do a video on what I believe about the Zodiac and why it seems so accurate at times. So, first off, before I even discuss the Zodiac, like everything, I'm just going to simply define it in case someone is unaware of what the Zodiac is, because in all honesty, growing up, I was told as a child that horoscopes, astrology, and all of that was satanic, and I wasn't allowed to look at it. I didn't even know my sign until I was an adult. So, I'm just going to quickly define it. So, the Zodiac are the 12 signs listed in a horoscope. It is closely tied to how the earth moves through the heavens. The signs are derived from the constellations that mark out the path on which the sun appears to travel over the course of a year. In principle, dates in a horoscope should be corresponded to when the sun passes through each constellation, but they don't much of the time. And a closer examination of the motion of the earth, the sun, and the stars shows the zodiac to be more complex than you might imagine. So, most will say that astrology today is considered a pseudoscience, just as alchemy was, even though it's the foundation of chemistry, and much of what astronomy is today kind of is derived from what astrology once was in the ancient world. So anything outside the realm of natural or empirical science is basically labeled pseudoscience, which anything delving into the supernatural or paranormal, and that's much of what I do on this channel. That is why whenever I make a playlist called Science, I put /paranormal, because for me, I don't mark out things just because it's not popular by mainstream scientific textbooks. And I am a science major, but I would never hear about half the things I discuss on this channel. So, still, many today still use it as a guide for their life, and it's an ancient practice. So, most will trace the origins of the zodiac back to Babylon in 2nd millennium BC. But I will go a step further to say, because I do believe in the validity of the Book of Enoch, because it's referenced in the Bible, and I constantly hear every time I mention it that the Book of Enoch isn't in the Bible, it's occultic, it's made up, and all of that. I'm not going to argue over it. I just am stating my beliefs, and if it doesn't align with the Word of God, then I throw it out. But it does talk about in Enoch 8, 1 through 3, what the watchers, the angels that were appointed to watch over the earth and watch over mankind, but fell prey to their lustful temptations when seeing the beauty of women. The same story in Genesis 6:4 that people argue over. Was it the righteous sons of Seth and the wicked daughters of Cain? It was two humans that came together and cohabited and made giants. It's a metaphor and all of that. And they argue all of these scriptures and everything. But I'm just going to call a spade and just say, okay, so in Enoch 1 through 8, 1 through 3. And Azazel taught mankind to make swords and knives and shields and coats of mail, and taught them to see what was behind them, and their works of art, bracelets and ornaments, and the use of robe, and the beautifying of eyebrows, and the dearest and choicest and all, choice stones and all. And then 8:2 says, coloring substances as the metals of the earth, and there was great wickedness and much fornication. And this fornication discussed isn't just simply sex outside of marriage. It's talking about prostitution, because whenever they were mentioning it many times in the Bible, it wasn't just simple, oh, I'm having sex outside of marriage. No, it was prostituting herself, even though sex outside of marriage is still a form of fornication. So 8:3 says, sin and all their ways were corrupt. Amar-Zarach taught all the conjurers and root cutters, Amaros the loosening of conjurations, Baragel the astrologers, Kokabel the signs, and Temel taught astrology, and Azrael taught the course of the moon. And 8:4 just says, and in the destruction of mankind they cried aloud, and their voices reached heaven. So as you can see, even though many people today, we have makeup, we have jewelry, we have teaching the middle of earth and magic, it all originated from fallen angels. So many will trace what we know today, all of this, back to the ancient people of the post-flood world rather than the antediluvian world. But magic, you see, has its roots in the Watchers' teaching. This is why people in the occult refer to the Watchers as the wise ones, the old ones, so forth, and they say they guard portals of high places. So, the Watchers perverted what we know today as the Zodiac. I don't believe it was evil before, but it does say later on in the Book of Enoch that they taught the secrets of heaven, and those were the useless secrets. And the way they perverted it was by getting people to worship the sun, moon, and stars rather than the Most High. Like everything, the devil seems to want to taint what God naturally is intended to be good. Just like when I was talking about the 1111 phenomenon, I had mixed reviews. Some of you guys were saying that you had positive experiences, while others of you said it was a demonic attack. I have had either or. So, some believe that the Zodiac at one point in the ancient world foretold of the coming of the Messiah Yeshua, while others say it foretells later of the Antichrist. It was the astrologers who were the three wise men who traveled to see Yeshua. Also, astrologers in the Bible are oftentimes referred to as observers of time. And they were guided by a star, and remember, these guys looked up to the sky. They were sky watchers. It was a belief of the ancient world that the balance of the universe, the masculinity, the femininity, the yin and the yang, the hot and the cold, the night and the day, the summer and winter, that whole shebang was basically controlled by the energy from the heavenly bodies, the stars, the moon, the sun, and this is another reason they were so adamant about worshiping them. Most historians will say that sun worship is present all over the earth. You can see it on every continent, every tribe, and you see it constantly in modern symbology with the sun ray symbol, halos behind the saints' heads, which is pagan in origin, and this was added later on. Just like the image that we have of Jesus today isn't what he truly looked like. Most will say that they worship the sun because the sun brings life. It's basic biology that without the sun, that all life on Earth would die because it gives life to plants, plants produce CO2, and so forth. Many sun cults believed in human sacrifice, and you can take the Mayans, for example. And I hate to use them all the time, but as you've ever seen the movie Apocalypto, then you'd be aware of it, probably. Most will attribute the teaching of magic to Mesopotamia and ancient Babylon because it has some of the oldest known texts along with ancient Egypt. So Nimrod pretty much founded that civilization, and his name actually means rebel. So he was exactly that, and he was also a mortal enemy of Abraham. If you read the book of Jasher, you'll get a better picture of that rivalry. In Genesis, he tried to build the Tower of Babel. Some say whenever God later divided the tongues, he also divided the nations, and that was the splitting of Pangaea, while others believe that the splitting of Pangaea was when he flooded the earth. So, Owen Astrology, which is when they try to predict an omen based on the planets, roots back to ancient Babylon. According to historians, traces back to the 16th century BC, known as Enuma Anu Enlil, consisting of 70 cuneiform tablets and 7,000 celestial omens. According to the Babylonian mythology, the gods were thought to manifest themselves through the celestial images of planets or stars. So, this is very crucial to understand because later when I talk about this, and kind of like when I did the black magic video, you'll see this come into play. So other cultures besides the Babylonians had their own versions of astrology, like the Greeks and Romans. They actually mixed it with astronomy, and it was called Ptolemaic astrology. What's interesting about them worshiping stars and planets is that in the Bible, oftentimes the angels are referred to as stars. Think about in the account of the war in heaven in the book of Revelation, when it talks about how it depicts Satan warring against Michael, and then he's cast down. But rather than saying angels, it's talking about stars. Whenever you're talking about the fifth trumpet in the Bible, it talks about how a star filled the key. That star isn't just a simple star, it's an angel once again. In the occult, stars oftentimes are believed to be portals. So, evil celestial omens in the ancient world were seen as a sign by astrologers that the gods were angry. And I just want to point out really fast that, remember in the book of Daniel how it talks about how they were supposed to predict certain things and none of the men could interpret the dream correctly, but then here comes Daniel, who is instructed by Yahweh, and he's able to. Many times you'll see this duality within the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, of the observers of time, the wise men who are basically magicians and who are using astrology, trying to predict things, and they fail to predict it, but then whenever someone is led by Yahweh, they are able to. I think this is important to understand because we have people who are fortune tellers and so forth, and it seems like they have some form of accuracy because spirits can kind of go out and they can try to manipulate variables, but in the end, they do not know the future. The only one who knows the future is Yahweh. So, what's interesting about saying that whenever they believe there was an evil celestial omen that the gods were angry is I watched the SpongeBob movie this weekend, and I thought I never would because I burned myself out on SpongeBob as a child, but it was pretty crazy, and they had a lot of symbolism and things in it. But it wasn't really funny, but it's just like the Lego movie, pretty blatant, and I'll probably go more in depth whenever I do a video that's simply just on all movies like I did last year. So they had time travel, which is pretty much in everything now, even though people say it's impossible, but they keep putting it in movies and things. And they had Saturn and the symbolism and Jupiter and everything, which is many times associated with time and space and all of that. But they also had the inhabitants of Bikini Bottom. They needed a sacrifice to appease the sandwich gods because Sandy figured out that the sandwich gods were angry because by losing the Krabby Patty formula, I'm spoiling the movie, I always do this, it calls basically the end of the world or chaos, and it looked like Mad Max on the movie. It was pretty outrageous. But the point is that even there you saw them sneak in some of the ancient symbology of human sacrifice, appeasing things, the planets and everything else like that, and time travel. So, some planets that are associated with gods really quick. So Jupiter is with Marduk, and he's also known as Ra in ancient Egypt, or Zeus in Greek mythology, Bel in Canaanite mythology, and is affiliated with Thursday. Venus with the god Ishtar, Isis in Egypt, Diana in Roman mythology, Aphrodite in Greek mythology, and Astarte in Canaanite mythology. And she's associated with Friday. Saturn is with Ninurta and with Kronos in Greek mythology, Jeb in Egyptian mythology, Moloch in Canaanite mythology, which right there, Moloch, you'll probably hear a lot about this owl. You'll see him for Bohemian Grove, but also with child sacrifice. It's interesting, it goes with Saturn. Remember, Kronos was known to eat his children. So that's just one interesting thing. Mercury with Nabu or Nebo, and I'm probably butchering these names, and someone will come after me and say, you don't know how to pronounce anything right. It's kind of become a running joke for me now. Hermes in Greek, Thoth in Egypt, and it's also associated with Wednesday. Mars with Nergal or Aries in Greek, Amun-Ra in Egypt, and associated with Tuesday, and with the ram. And of course, Sunday with the sun, and Monday with the moon. So as you can see, even the days of our week are named after pagan deities. So even though they tell us that all of this religion and all of this magic, it's what's it called? Because I'm going to get to this later. It's pseudoscience, it's not important, it's superstition. Still, we continue to use the names. If we need to move past that, then we should probably get rid of the pagan names of all of these days of the week, and even with, there's so much we'd have to get rid of if we wanted to get rid of all forms of religion according to those who think it's all a bunch of mind control and brainwashing. So, I talked about how in the black magic video I mentioned how there was a connection here. So, in the occult, people will use astrology to work witchcraft. It's basically the foundation of it. You can't do ritual or ceremonial magic without using the planets or astrology. And I'll explain this. For instance, if you're trying to do a ritual during the Mercury retrograde, and one just occurred recently, I believe between May 23rd and June 11th was the final day of it, so it's over now. And if you're trying to acquire knowledge, because that's what someone in the occult would do if they wanted to acquire knowledge, they would do it to the planet Mercury, because Mercury is after a god, a false god, I'll say, or a fallen angel. They would not want to work it during the Mercury retrograde because it would be, basically, it would backfire, it would reverse on it, it wouldn't work. So a retrograde is this whole ideal that the planet has the appearance that it's moving backwards. It's not actually moving backwards, but it has the appearance. And so people in the occult will not want to work a ritual of their desired effect from that planet on a retrograde. Same thing with Venus. It's associated with love spells and with love and all of that. So someone who's trying to do that would not want to work it while Venus is retrograding. So as you can see, the planets play a key role in many black magicians determining when they want to work a ritual. But also, they use planets to inflict harm on others as well. Like they'll say that, I believe Mercury has to do a lot with your mental health. So if they want to drive someone crazy, they'll do the ritual in honor to Mercury as well, I believe. I could be wrong about that. But the point is, astrology is the foundations of witchcraft as well. So, usually planets, since they're based off deities, are attributed to certain personalities and bodily functions. And this is getting into horoscopes, which I'll get to in a sec. So modern astrology, which is a condensed form of Babylonian astrology, you can find in many magazines. When you open up the back of it, you'll see horoscopes listed, and you'll find your date of birth, and then it'll tell you what your days of, like, what's going to happen each day. Many will read these religiously. So I'll give you an example. I'm a Libra. So I have the scales, and supposedly I'm indecisive since I weigh all my options and so forth, which pretty much is true. I mean, not that I don't really consider myself indecisive, but it does take me a while to make a decision. I would say that I'm deliberative. But in reality, while I do exhibit some of the traits that they claim Libras exhibit, I also do not fit some of those traits. Like, I'm supposed to be a socialite, and I'm far from that. I've told you guys plenty of times that most people will see me as antisocial because I'm the last person that's going to be speaking at an event or speaking, or even the life of the party. I'm far from that. So even though there are some things I could say, oh yeah, the Libra fits me, you know, I like art and I like knowledge and so forth, but at the same time, I'm no socialite. There's some discrepancies in it as well. So many, though, use astrology to figure out what will happen, and it will go off who they're most compatible with. I hear people asking people when they're hooking up, what's your sign? Because supposedly there's compatibility based on when two people are born, which supposedly can help determine how a relationship will work out or won't work out, whether dating, marrying, or even with friendship. Some people use astrology. I'll just tell you guys this. So I told you I'm a Libra, and I believe Libras aren't very compatible with Capricorns as far as friends and relationships go, but I'm going to tell you this. I live in a house full of Capricorns. Everyone in my family is born in late December or early January, so I'm like the odd one out here, and I get along with all my family members great. I'm pretty much like them. So even though they say that that would be a hard thing and poor me suffering amongst these Capricorns, in reality, I have a pretty good time. So I don't think that there's a lot of accuracy just based on my personal experience, while others probably will argue there is. So I just want to share this really quick. So there was a psychology study done, which is referred to as the Forer effect. This is the result that came from it, or the Barnum Effect. And it's this idea that horoscopes garner the concept we've got something personally tailored for everyone, when in reality it's very general and vague, that it can be applied to a wide range of people. So this is referred to as subjective validation, and is when two unrelated events are linked. And some will try to use this to dismiss the paranormal, and I will say that I don't believe that everything that psychology kind of presents, but I will say that this study was pretty interesting. So what happened is, in 1948, psychologist Bertram R. Forer gave a psychology test. His diagnostic interest was blank to a group of his psychology students, who were told they would each receive a brief personality vignette or sketch based or their results. 1 week later, Forer gave each student a purportedly individualized sketch and asked each of them to rate it on how well it applied. In reality, each student received the same sketch consisting of the following items. You've probably seen the Penn and Teller video as well. Penn and Teller BS video about astrology being BS. And they will reference James Randi, who was another person who set out to debunk astrology as a whole. But some of the questions that they had on there, and later they had all the students stand up and read the results. Well, not all of them, but some of them. And everyone realized they had the same results. So the first one was, you have a great need for other people to like and admire you. I would say that the majority of the population would probably answer yes to that. You have a tendency to be critical of yourself. You have a great deal of unused capacity which you may have not turned to your advantage. While you have some personality weaknesses, you are generally able to compensate for them. Your sexual adjustment has presented problems for you. Disciplined and self-controlled outside, you tend to be worrisome and insecure inside. At times, you have serious doubts as to whether you have made the right decision or done the right thing. You prefer a certain amount of change and variety and become dissatisfied when hemmed in by restrictions and limitations. You pride yourself as an independent thinker and do not accept others' statements without satisfactory proof. You have found it unwise to be too frank in revealing yourself to others. At times you are extroverted, affable, sociable, while at other times you are introverted, wary, reserved. Some of your aspirations tend to be pretty unrealistic. Security is one of your major goals in life. So, as you can see, it's pretty open, it's pretty broad, it leaves room for many people to relate. Not every question I think every individual would relate to, but this is pretty general. So what the results basically were to try to prove is that the belief that people can read horoscopes and interpret or personalize it to them, and that's why they seem so accurate. So you can have 10 people who read it and they can make it relevant to them in their own way. It's kind of like when you read a book. We all can read the same story, but the story has different meanings, different individuals, different strokes for different folks kind of thing. So, in the end, a lot can be said about the zodiac and astrology. Is it valid? Should it be paid attention to? Or should it just be deemed pseudoscience and ignored? I would say as a Christian, regardless of how real or fake it is today, there's a lot of perversions in it. And it's something that I would not want to entangle myself with in terms of horoscopes, because really I'm not going to rely on the month I'm born to predict my future. But it's something that can't be totally ignored. It's a huge part of history to understand spiritual warfare and how the enemy works based on planets, and is helpful in understanding the dark arts such as black magic. But something I myself wouldn't want to obsess over or get too deeply involved in either. But I will say, though, that even though we may see astrology as, well, I'm not going to say we because each person watching this video has their own opinion, but while some may see astrology as BS or inaccurate, keep in mind that the occultists, a lot of times when we're talking about human sacrifice or rituals, take all of this into account. So I do think astrology is important to understand at least the basics of it. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video and you took something from it and it had enough information for you. I know it was kind of vague. And I hope you have a wonderful week. Take care, and Yahweh bless you.